Michael Lardie of Great White. Welcome to the Music Universe. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys. Matt and Buddy, the men.
Yes. Well, thank you for being with us. I'm excited to get to see you at M3 Rock Festival. How excited are you to be coming to the DC region for this big 3-day event?
It's always great to play M3. We've been pretty lucky of late. We've been doing pretty much every other year, which is great for us. We're doing a show up in Flint, Michigan. Got a travel day, and then we're over in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. Awesome. 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 So
What
go ahead,
what
buddy.
about what about M3 and those classic rock type festivals draws Great White to want to play it?
I think it's, obviously the fan base is, pretty perfect for our genre of music, with many of those. And it's cool to see everybody still doing it. I mean, that's another thing that's, warms your heart, when you're there and you're doing the show with all the different bands that are there. It's kind of like, wow, we're still doing it. This is awesome.
Yeah, I've often wondered because last year was our first time going to M3 in particular, but I go to festivals, a couple of them every year. What goes into deciding the festival set? You find out where you are on the lineup, you know how long you have. How do you time out a set and make sure that you hit those times so that everything runs smoothly? How do you decide a set list based on timing like that?
Well, that's the thing. It's a bit more of a challenge because every band has 60 minutes, that
Yeah.
plays, except for I think the headliner has a little bit more than that on any particular night. We have sets that we do different set lengths all the time. And like say if we open up for Queensryche somewhere, we might do 50 minutes. If we do a double bill with Slaughter, we might both do 60. If we're headlining, say we have Vixen, on the bill as well.
Mhm.
We might do 75. Some shows when we're by ourselves, we'll do 90 to 100 minutes. So it's, working those sets together over time and going, okay, let's plug in something that is the 60-minute set. But at the same time, you want to make sure you cover hopefully the best of your albums,
Yeah.
for the fans that will recognize, pretty much everything you're doing. And that's always the challenge, but we get there, and
That's
it's a lot of
awesome.
fun.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and I was very familiar with your catalog growing up. Being an '80s guy myself, we just had Ricky Rocket of Poison on a couple weeks ago, and you just like I told him, you guys have just some iconic songs that they're earworms and they're great songs. What is it? I know when you sit down to write songs, you don't necessarily think that they're going to turn into that. You just don't know what they're going to do sometimes, but just some great blues based rock and roll there. What does it feel like now to have such iconic songs like House of Broken Love? And I know Once Bitten, Twice Shy is not something you guys wrote, but a big song you guys covered, Save Your Love, things like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great compliment to us, and it's especially true. Say we're doing a festival, that's an all-age scenario. One of my greatest joys is to see that 10-year-old kid on his grandpa or his dad's shoulders singing the lyrics and the verse of Rock Me. I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that they're passing the music on from generation to generation, to me as a songwriter, that's one of the greatest compliments you could possibly get, that your music lasts, that it's not just, oh, I don't want to hear that. That was 40 years ago.
Yeah. Now, and I want to talk about you, Michael. Next year, you'll be celebrating 40 years with the band. I know you were session in 1986, and then in 87, you started to join on the road. Tell me the story. How did you go from a session player to joining the band full time?
Well, I actually was on staff at Total Access Recording, which is where they did their very first record in 83. That's where I met them. So they went out on the tour with Priest for Defenders of the Faith, if you remember that tour. They came back in to record demos and were thinking about, maybe adding another guitarist and somebody who played keyboards. And I just, raised my hand like, I'm that guy, I'm also an engineer, I work with different bands and stuff. So I worked on your record. I sang backgrounds on the first record. So it just kind of very organically kind of moved into that direction. And on Shot in the Dark, I had a co-write on one of the tunes, and once we got to Once Bitten, we were writing all the material in pre-production, and right before we started the record, they turned to me and said, "You're in the band now, right?" I said, "Cool."
I
So
love
that's
that.
pretty much
That's
how
a
it
very
happened.
80s thing okay, you're in the band. It's
Yeah.
okay. Good. I love that. And reading about your career, how did you balance your time, those 4 years between Great White and Night Ranger, who, of course, Night Ranger did M3 last year. How did you manage your time in that way?
Well, it was interesting. I remember we had pulled down Great White so everybody could take a break in 2001.
Mhm.
So I think it was November of 2002. I'd been working with Jack Blaze in the studio a lot because we had done Can't Get There from here at his studio. And, been doing demo work with him on a lot of different things as an engineer. So he calls me up when Fitz couldn't play with them anymore because he had, I think, 2 or 3 alimonies he had to pay, and he had to work like 2 different gigs, and then he just couldn't pull off doing a third with a Night Ranger thing. So he had to take a break, and Jack called me up and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, just doing session work, as an engineer and producer." And he goes, "Why don't you come out and fill in for us?" And it was originally supposed to only be about 4 or 5 shows. And after we did that period of time, they ended up actually asking me, Great White's not reformed yet. Why don't you just come play with us? And it turned into almost a 4-year stint. So between that time of playing with Night Ranger, I was doing band camps as a counselor, the rock and roll fantasy camps.
Yeah.
I was doing some work with Jack and Tommy Shaw, on their duo thing they do. So it was just something that, my life was pretty full between, doing the engineering thing and playing with Night Ranger. So it's a very busy 4 years for me.
Love it.
Yeah. And then now with, Great White and, playing M3, and it seems like there's almost a resurgence of that classic rock nostalgia there that people are craving. Any potential new music in the works as Great White? And I ask that because so many classic bands have their hits and they don't tend to at least release, if they write or record it, new music. And is it just because maybe the way that music is consumed these days that it might get buried? Or any thoughts on that?
Well, we do have material that we are intending on recording fairly soon. It'll be this sometime this year. But, we had this idea that because, like, to your point, the way music is consumed differently than it was 30, 40 years ago, we're going to record bundles of 3 at a time, release those, maybe do 1 video out of the 3. Then 4 or 5 months later, we'll do the next 3 and the next 3. And before we know it, we'll have a full album, which we'll package and put out there as well. But in the meantime, I think, it's just because of social media and everything on the internet that it is constantly coming at us. There's so much to ingest on a daily basis. It's a different mentality. I don't think people have a lot of time to sit down and go through Zeppelin 4 like we all did when we were kids, listening to that record from start to finish. And, that's one of the reasons we did, albums, because we had a thought that, was going to make sense to us from, the first needle drop to the last Inside Band on side 2. So that was the whole mentality for making an album. I think things are changed. So we're trying to adopt to that, that change and see how that works out. But yeah, we're gonna definitely be releasing some new stuff this year.
Well,
And I-
great. And one more question about that. Will it be, and I ask this too, because musical styles have changed over the years, is it going to be the classic Great White sound that we've all come to love, or will it have some new incorporated? stuff?
I think it will. I mean, obviously the big thing that will change is, with the sound of our vocalist Brett Carlisle. But to me, sonically, he is definitely in the family of, where Jack was at in terms of the tone of his voice. So I think people will be able to connect with it far easier than stuff we've done with previous replacement singers. So I think people they seem to be really loving it live. When and Brett is great about being very clear about the melodies. He's very respectful of them, and doesn't try to over stylistically, put his stamp on it. He respects the music, and he understands the concept that when people come out to see the songs, they want to hear the songs as they
Sure.
remember them.
Sure. Yeah, Arnell very famously does that with Journey too, and that's a very good way to handle it. How did you guys find Brett? What was the process of finding a new permanent singer like for you guys?
A friend of ours down in Florida was managing his I don't like to call him necessarily a baby band, I guess, because they're all in their mid-20s now, but he's been working with them for a couple of years, and when it turned out, it was just a perfect scenario, knowing that Brett was such a huge 80s fan. His dad and mom raised him on Great White, Poison, Skid Row, I mean the whole genre, so he probably knows all of those songs by heart. He's never had to have a cheat sheet on stage. He knew the lyrics. He learned the lyrics over the years that he's been a singer, and he came out to Vegas to do a fill-in because obviously we had the date booked and couldn't cancel, and he had one rehearsal, and he came out and he nailed it, and then we asked him, can you come to New York next week, and he did that. And after that, I turned to Mark and said, this guy's gonna get it done. Let's just quit messing around here. So we both called him on a conference call, said, hey, what are you doing? Would you like to join the band? And
that almost echoes. I'm sorry to step on you, but that almost echoes how it happened for you almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You're working through it. It naturally happens, and you're in the band.
Yeah.
That's actually really cool. That's
maybe
really cool.
the organic approach is really in the DNA of the Great White, situation.
Yeah. And before we let you get out of here, there's something I was reading about you and all of the multi-instruments that you play in the band. When in your study of rock and roll and of instruments to play in rock and roll, whatever possessed you to pick up a banjo, and how did that happen? How did you learn to play the banjo? That is so cool.
It was one of those things where I thought that tone could be very appropriate for a particular song we had on Sail Away, Living in the USA. And I learned enough, to be able to do some licks and to be able to do some rhythm, on it and stuff. And I just, I brought the banjo down, and Mark and I worked out that part for the intro for that song. And, there it went. I mean, right now, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm learning pedal steel.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So, I mean, I always think of, what's an instrument that I can put on top of the Great White cake, so to speak, that might make it, a little bit different, a little bit interesting. I mean, pedal steel was used in Zeppelin, over the years. And it's something that's not that far away from the blues thing. I mean, you think about Robert Randolph, the guy's a monster, and does the whole blues rock thing on the pedal steel. So, I'm working on that. And that's the joy of being, a multi-instrumentalist, is you learn another instrument, and it's always the challenge.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah. Well, I have one final question for you, personally. Besides with Great White and everything else you're doing, are you producing and recording people and new bands and stuff on the side?
Whenever there's an opportunity to do that. I mean, we do about 45, 50 dates a year, and most weekends are, filled up. The most recent one I did of great note, which was a joy for me to do because I'm such a huge fan of hers, I got to mix a Sheryl Crow live record
Oh, wow.
in
Oh, cool.
2019. It's live from the Capitol Theater in New York. And I got to work with her musical director, Peter Stroud, who used to be in a band with her other guitarist, Ainsley, or Audley, as his name is. And they were in an 80s band that was kind of like on the third or fourth wave, that never really, popped. But it was great to work with the experience. She's such an incredible talent, and it was kind of like one of those dreams to be able to do something like that, because I know all the songs by heart anyway. So it was very easy to mix, and I had a lot of fun doing it.
I was going to say mixing would be, besides recording, mixing I think would be the fun but tedious part.
Yeah, it can be tedious when you're talking about setting up all the plugins and the sounds that you want to get on the kick drum, the snare drum, all that stuff. But once you start to make the track start to take shape, and you're putting things in like the voice and the solo guitar, and you've got the right amount of delay on this and that, and you kind of tailor it to the way you hear it. And if you're lucky and you do it well enough, the people like your style of things. That's why I like a guy like Chris Lardie does so great at mixing things, because he's got a specific sound that he does to records that people love, and he's pretty much known as the mixer guy, for a lot of artists.
I love it. Well, I cannot wait to see Great White at M3. I'll be around. Hopefully we'll get to say hello. This was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank both of you guys. And Sunday we're playing. So I think our slot is 4:40 to 5:40. So we'll be in the building from about 1 on. So come and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.